Hi, and welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you the latest discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education and entrepreneurship. As a 22-year entrepreneur, corporate executive, business coach, and leader, I mentor a community of change-making men and women to get out of their box and step into their true calling to make the biggest impact on the world. This podcast is all about empowering us, navigating life's twists and turns, and stepping into the fullest version of who we're meant to be. Okay, today I have a question that might make you pause for a second. When was the last time you felt completely aligned with who you are and what you're doing? I know, just casually hitting you with an existential crisis right out of the gate today. But seriously, when was the last time, not just good at something and not just checking the success boxes of life, but deeply, authentically connected to your purpose and your identity? And if you're anything like the high-achieving women that I work with, that one might have hit. Because here's what I've noticed. We've gotten really good at pursuing purpose. We know our mission. We've got the why language down. We can explain our impact. But somewhere along the way, we lose touch with our who, our identity, that grounded inner version of ourselves that exists beyond the roles, beyond the titles, and beyond everyone else's expectations. And that disconnect, it's costing us. According to Gallup, only 21% of employees say that they can show up as their full selves at work. Only 21%. And that number drops even lower for women in leadership. When we can't show up authentically, we don't just sacrifice fulfillment, we limit our impact. So today we're going deep into what I believe is the most powerful, most radical business strategy there is, living authentically. We're talking about how aligning your purpose with your identity doesn't just feel better, it works better for your business, for your relationships, and for your inner peace. So let's dive in. Let's start by getting clear on what we're actually talking about here, because these terms get thrown around a lot, but they're not the same thing. Your purpose is your why. That's the driving force behind your actions. It's the impact you want to make, the change you want to see, the reason you get up and do the work you do every day. Your identity, on the other hand, is your sense of self. It's how you see and define yourself at your core, and how you see yourself in the world. It's your values, your beliefs, your unique perspective shaped by your experiences, your strengths, and yes, even your struggles. And here's where it gets interesting. You can have a crystal clear purpose and still feel completely lost. You can be making an impact that looks incredible from the outside, but inside still feel empty. Because purpose without identity, it's like having a powerful engine with no frame to hold it. Sure, it might run, it might even roar, but without something solid to anchor it to, your values, your voice, yourself, it's not going anywhere. And what happens when you pursue purpose without a strong sense of identity? I see this all the time in my coaching practice, and maybe you've experienced it yourself. Chronic burnout that no amount of time off seems to fix. When you're operating from a place of should rather than authenticity, every action requires more energy because you're constantly swimming upstream against your natural current. Or imposter syndrome that no achievement can cure. A Harvard Business Review study found that 70% of people experience imposter syndrome, but it's particularly acute among high-achieving women who feel disconnected from their authentic selves. Wow. When your success doesn't align with your identity, you feel like you're pretending to be someone else because you are. Or maybe constant dissatisfaction despite external success. You check all the boxes, you hit all the metrics, you earn all of the recognition, but something still feels off. That's your identity trying to flag your attention. Maybe you felt decision paralysis and second guessing, And this one is absolutely draining. When you don't know who you are, every decision becomes overwhelming because you don't have an internal compass that's consistent to guide you. And here's a stat that might surprise you. Nearly 70% of employees, 70%, say they aren't connected to the purpose of their work, according to McKinsey. But I'd even take it a step further because in my experience, a lot of these people aren't just disconnected from their company's purpose. They're disconnected from their own identity. They've been so focused on doing the work, hitting the goals, staying on brand, that they've lost sight of who they are underneath it all. Now let's talk about something that really hits close to home for a lot of us, and that is confusing our roles with our identity. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a mom. I'm a high achiever. I'm a wife. I'm a team leader. Listen, those roles can be deeply meaningful at times. They can reflect parts of who we are, but they are not the whole story. They're titles, they're not truths. And when we start to build our entire sense of self around them, that's when things get shaky. I learned this the hard way very early in my entrepreneurial journey. I had wrapped my entire identity around being that successful business owner. My worth, my confidence, my entire self-concept was tied up in how the business was performing. And then we hit a rough patch. Margins were really thin. Revenue dipped. A major client walked away. And suddenly all of the external gold stars that I'd been using to define myself started disappearing. And I was left wondering, well, now who am I? Who am I without the business card? And I'm not alone. Research from Harvard Business School found that entrepreneurs who over-identify with their business experience, higher rates of anxiety and depression when things go south, because when the role is threatened, their entire identity feels like it's unraveling. But it doesn't just apply to business. It's the same thing for the woman who sees herself only as that perfect mom, or the overachieving employee, or the one who always holds it all together. What happens when these roles shift? What happens when the kids leave home? Or when the job changes? Or when you pivot? Or when life just lifes? Anything can happen. If your identity is rooted only in what you do instead of who you are, you're building something on shifting sand, and eventually the ground will move. But now let's flip the script and let's talk about what happens when you get this right. When your identity and purpose are aligned, something magical happens. Authenticity becomes your competitive advantage. When your identity and your purpose are aligned, something powerful happens. You start making decisions from clarity, not fear. You stop second guessing yourself because you've got an internal compass now that's actually calibrated to you, your values, your voice, and your vision. Suddenly, you know which opportunities to say yes to and which ones to release without any guilt, by the way. Not because some Insta guru told you what's right for your business, but because you feel what's aligned. You know what supports the life you're actually wanting to build. And here's the magic. When you show up in that kind of alignment, you stop shape-shifting to fit other people's expectations. And when you do that, you attract the right clients, the right partnerships, and the right opportunities, all because you're finally showing up as the real you. And when people connect with that version of you, the connection is deeper. It's more loyal. It's more sustainable than anything built on a version of perceived perfection. In fact, a study from Zanger Folkman found that leaders who show up with authenticity have teams that are 2.3 times more likely to be fully engaged at work. So this isn't just good for you. It's good for everyone around you. It's good for business. Authenticity creates better outcomes, stronger relationships, and ultimately more meaningful impact. Let's be real. Authenticity, though, isn't always easy. Being your true self means not everyone will like it. Not every room will welcome you. Some people may find your authenticity uncomfortable. But here's what I've learned through my own journey. The cost of being inauthentic is always higher than the risk of being yourself. Let me repeat that one more time. The cost of being inauthentic is always higher than the risk of being yourself. Yes, okay, you might lose out on certain opportunities, but in all likelihood, they were probably misaligned to begin with. You might not resonate with everyone, but the people you do connect with, those connections will run deep. At times, you might face criticism, but you'll also attract the champions and cheerleaders who genuinely see and value what you bring. And those are your people anyway. In fact, research from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School shows that employees who feel safe being authentic at work report higher levels of engagement, creativity, and job satisfaction. And even more importantly, they're more likely to be seen as strong leaders and to earn promotions. Authenticity has a gravitational pull. It draws in the right people, the right opportunities, and the right kind of momentum. No amount of branding or networking can replace that. When you show up as your whole self, you give others around you permission to do the same. And that is how we build meaningful relationships, purposeful work, and lasting impact. So how do you know if you're operating out of alignment? This is a good question. We're going to talk about some warning signs that I see all the time, and you might recognize some of these in yourself right now. First one, you're saying yes to the wrong things. You find yourself overcommitted to projects, to relationships sometimes, or opportunities that look really good on paper, or you feel like you really want to commit to them, but they feel wrong in your body. You say yes out of obligation, sometimes guilt, sometimes fear of missing out, but not because it lights you up. Somewhere along the way, your shoulds start drowning out your gut. Another sign, you're simmering in quiet resentment. I felt this one before. This one is huge. Resentment builds when your actions don't reflect your values. You might feel bitter about commitments that other people would envy, or confused by your frustration when everything should feel good. That pressure that you're feeling, that's your inner self banging on the door, begging you to listen. Another symptom, you're stuck in cycles of overwork or self-doubt. When you're not leading from your authentic identity, even simple tasks feel heavier. You're swimming upstream, maybe, exhausting yourself by trying to fit a mold that was never made for you in the first place. Or even worse, you're second-guessing every move because deep down, you're not sure whose path you're on anymore. Or maybe your work just no longer feels like you. This is the clearest signal. You look at your business, your career, or even your social media presence, and you think, this isn't me. Maybe it was at one time. Maybe it was built on someone else's version of success. But now it feels like a costume you're tired of wearing. According to Deloitte's Global Millennial and Gen Z survey, 44% of millennials and 49% of Gen Z respondents said they would consider leaving their current job within 2 years if they could not bring their authentic selves to work. That's nearly half of an entire generation saying that authenticity at work isn't negotiable. But let's go to a deeper level. Beyond the systems of misalignment, overcommitment, resentment, burnout, there's something even more important waiting for your attention. You. Not the version of you that checks all the boxes and gets things done, not the version of you that shows up perfectly polished on LinkedIn or Instagram, the real you, the one underneath all the roles and responsibilities. So I want to offer you a few questions, not to rush through and not to solve, but just to sit with, to carry with you in quiet moments, long walks, or in your journal. Who am I outside of what I do? If you took away all the titles, all the awards, all the to-do lists, the business cards, who would you be? What would light you up? What would you fight for? What would bring you joy if no one else was watching? What would bring you joy so much you would do it for free? And does my current work reflect what I truly value or just what I'm good at? There's a difference between being capable and being called. You might be great at managing, organizing, fixing, but does it feed your soul? Competence can mask misalignment if we're not careful. What am I tolerating that doesn't align with who I want to become? What compromises have you accepted as normal, even though they quietly drain you? What have you convinced yourself you just have to deal with? These small daily tolerations are often the biggest barriers to transformation. They add up. These questions, they're not meant to stir up shame or spark a life crisis at all, but they're meant to create clarity because you can't shift what you don't name. And you don't need all the answers right now. You just need the courage to start asking the right questions. So how do we fix this? How do we reconnect with our authentic identity and align it with our purpose? Let me give you a framework that I use with my clients and that I continue to use in my own life. Approach it with curiosity, not judgment. Identity work isn't about fixing what's broken because you're not broken. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You're not a project that needs perfecting. You're a person who's remembering, reconnecting, rediscovering parts of yourself that may have been buried under years of expectations, achievements, roles, and responsibilities. Think of it like archaeology. You're not building a new identity from scratch. You're gently excavating the truth of who you already are. And that process requires patience, gentleness, and a whole lot of curiosity about what you might find when you stop performing and just start listening. And the research backs this up. A Stanford University study found that people who approach personal growth with a growth mindset focused on learning, curiosity, and progress are significantly more likely to make meaningful and lasting changes in both their careers and their personal lives. So give yourself the gift of not needing to have it all figured out. Start with awareness. Stay open, stay curious, because the rest will come. And here, let's talk about some actionable steps. Here are 3 concrete steps you can take to begin this realignment process, starting with the first one: clarify your values. Values are the foundation of authentic identity. They're the principles that guide your decisions when no one else is watching, the things that matter to you regardless of the external circumstances. Try this values inventory exercise. Write down a list of 20 to 30 values that resonate with you. Things like creativity, family, adventure, justice, learning, service, freedom, whatever speaks to you. And then narrow it down to your top 10. Then your top 5. And finally, identify your top 3 core values. These aren't the values you think you should have or the ones that look good on paper. So challenge yourself. These are the values that, when honored, make you feel most like yourself. So do it and without any judgment, truly with an open mind. And step 2, audit your life and work. So now take an honest look at where you're living out of alignment. Go through different areas of your life, your work, your relationships, perhaps your marriage. How do you spend your time? How you make decisions? And ask yourself, where am I honoring my values and where am I compromising them? It isn't about creating a massive overhaul overnight. It's about awareness. And again, awareness without the judgment. Maybe you discover that one of your core values is creativity, but you haven't made space for any creative expression in months. Or maybe you value deep connection with others, but you're spending most of your time in surface level networking events that drain you. Or maybe you're holding up in your office, spending more time with yourself. If you're ready to start reconnecting with your values and boundaries in a really grounded, practical way, I made something for you, the Boundaries Blueprint 5-minute daily mental health tracker. It's a simple, powerful tool just to help you check in with yourself every day. It empowers you to spot the patterns, identify what areas of life need that little extra support, and build a life that actually feels like yours. Because the truth is, alignment doesn't just start with big changes. It starts with small, consistent choices. And then step 3, take aligned action. Start small. Choose one area where you're out of alignment and take one small action to shift toward authenticity. Maybe that means saying no to a project that doesn't fit your values anymore. Maybe it means having an honest conversation with someone in your life. Or maybe it means carving out time for something that brings you joy but doesn't have any productive purpose. That's okay too. And if you decide to give the Boundaries Blueprint a try, you'll have access to a dedicated chapter of recommendations and reflections that are designed to help you make progress across 7 key areas of your personal and professional life. The key here is consistency over intensity. Small, aligned actions compound over time, and they create massive shifts in how you experience your life and work. Here's something that makes a huge difference too. Surround yourself with people who reflect your values and not just your goals. Find your community. We often think about networking and relationships in terms of what people can do for us professionally. But authentic relationships are built on shared values and mutual respect for who people are, not just what they can achieve. Look at the 5 people you spend the most time with. Do they encourage you to be yourself? Do they share similar values to you, even if they're in different industries maybe, or maybe they're different life stages? And if the answer is no, it might be time to expand your circle. Join communities, attend events, and don't be afraid to make new connections. You'll be amazed at how much easier it becomes to stay true to you when you're surrounded by people who are doing the same thing. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with this. Living authentically is the most radical business strategy there is because it's sustainable. When your identity fuels your purpose, your impact becomes inevitable. You don't have to choose between being yourself and being successful. In fact, the most lasting success, the kind that doesn't burn you out or pull you out of alignment, only comes from the intersection of these 2 things. Because when who you are and what you do are aligned, work doesn't feel like a grind. Opportunities come with more ease. Relationships deepen and feel more meaningful. Impact isn't forced, it flows. But most importantly, you get to wake up each day and be you, fully, unapologetically, and courageously. And there is nothing more powerful than a person who knows who they are and aren't afraid to show up as their whole self in a world that constantly tries to mold them into something else. Thank you for joining me today. If this episode resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. Please leave a review and pass this message along to someone else who needs to hear it. I'll see you back here next week. Until then, take care.